Tim, I love covering this team and talking about the team because of the diversity of writers and reporters and people who cover and watch this team. And over the last few days, read a piece from yourself talking about the idea of the Mavericks generating more 2-point shots, and obviously everything built around Luka Doncic, what he does. And then Brian Damaris, former Dallas Mavericks analytics staffer, had put together a piece talking about maybe the Mavericks should embrace the idea of becoming the James Harden-like Rockets from a few years ago. Where do you stand in what the Mavericks should ultimately, based on what Luka Doncic is and what they decided to build around him?
Yeah, I think that my piece, more or less you described it, but it was more pointing to the idea that the Mavericks don't shoot twos like they did last season. And, everything is different. Jason Kidd said starting this season that this would be a different season, that this would be a different team, that they'd have to find their own identity. But because the Mavericks brought so many players back, with the exception of Jalen Brunson, I think there was a sense that this team would be a lot like last team. Last year's team, I should say. And I wanted to really emphasize how Jalen Brunson's exclusion very much impacted the way that they're able to generate the twos, and that they're just going to be more reliant on three-point shooting. And my idea was basically like, okay, you can lean into, more players that can do more off the dribble, players like Christian Wood, who is capable of creating his own two-point shots, more minutes for Josh Green, which I think should happen regardless. Or you could do what Damaris laid out really well in his article in D Magazine, where he's just like, okay, this is a three-point shooting team. Let's shoot, they should shoot a lot of them. And I think that now that I've had a few days to kind of reflect on this, I think Brian might be right. And just in the sense that, we know that this team has one singular, basketball, cheat code almost. And that is basically they have the best three-point shot creator in the league. I don't think there's any question that's what Luka Doncic is. And I really see the argument that, as long as they have that and they have the ability to do that, creating more threes and playing more three-point shooters, Tim Hardaway Jr. getting hot, throw Davis Bertans in there a little bit more often and just say, this is what, we as a team, if you're the Mavericks, we as a team, this is what we do well. Let's lean into it. And I think there's a lot of merit to that, and I think that's clearly been shown over the past 5 games. I think at some point they're going to miss a few more threes than they have the past 5 games. But the idea that this team has a very clear strength and that they should just, as frustrating as it will be during games that they miss a lot of them, it still is their strength. And, the more you can lean into your strengths as a basketball team, I think that's the right approach.
So, Tim, I did find that approach interesting as well as you did, but the things that I notice as a difference, not that the team has to be an exact replica of what that Rockets team was, but the things that I noticed that are different from this team and that team were that team made a lot more free throws while getting a ton of them. That team also did get right to the rack a decent amount, and that team also had like a clear shot blocker or a person that would change shots on the defensive end. Is there a way to kind of get that type of play out of this team, or is there a way to maybe substitute for some of these things with what is currently constituting this Mavs team?
Yeah, and that's kind of the question. I think you spelled it out well, is that I think Houston during that era maximized so many different other phases of being, just like doing things that allow you to win. And I think the Mavericks, in a lot of ways, I think when they've struggled this season, what I've really seen is their, basically the way I described it is like inability to get easy points. They're not a fast break team. Luka's pace is very slow. And that is true for the James Harden Rockets as well. But they're not a team that gets a lot of offensive rebounds. They're, defense, it's good, not great. Even at their best, they're not going to be a top 5 unit, I don't think, because they don't have the players to be a top 5 unit. Like you said, they don't have the shot blocker. And so I think a lot of the flaws of this team is that, even if you can be the best half-court offense you can be and you can shoot so many threes that, other teams that, you're just going to win by, scoring threes more often, than you're giving up twos, that there is an inherent, issue with the way this team was constructed, with the way the roster is built. I don't know if there's a way around that because, quite frankly, we came into the season understanding that this was not a championship contending team, that even if they re-signed their Jalen Brunson, they probably weren't going to be a championship contending team, but certainly not without him. And, I think the goal for the season is to make the best version of the team that you can that does win a lot of games and that does, allow it to be a smooth transitionary year, that one that Luka isn't going to be frustrated. He isn't going to feel like, this isn't the franchise for him, because there is moves to be made in the future. They're just not quite ready for that. They haven't, built up the needed, pieces to go make that next trade. But they still have to play the season. And so, I think this is a flawed team. I do not think this is going to be the same team as the Rockets, who, took the best team maybe ever to 7. Like, I think we forget how good that Rockets team was. But the fact that they have some missing pieces from that just kind of points to the fact that they're not that good. But maybe this is still the best way to play and the best way to maximize what they can do this season and get through it and have fun and have Luka have fun and, maybe he wins an MVP. And then you're starting to look ahead to, okay, how do we make this a title contender?
So we're talking to Tim Cato of The Athletic. And Tim, I did find that interesting, what your answer there, the idea of obviously just trying to make this team as good as possible. There is some idea of this team is just trying to win games right now, and at least that's what Jason Kidd has said. But there also is this feeling that they are not fully utilizing some players that could either help them win or that could help them figure out some things on what this team could best be. Those players clearly being the largely talked about Christian Wood, but also Jaden Hardy, who is, we've seen, flirt with the big team, but also go back to the Legends to get more minutes. Have we gotten any indication of what it would take for those guys to get there, and maybe more presciently, what the coaching staff is thinking in regards to the development of those players and getting more bigger placements in the rotation?
I think Jaden Hardy will get minutes and get his chances in the coming weeks and months. I think that slow playing the development of the 20-year-old is reasonable, and that's fine. And, rookies are exciting, especially rookies, who score a bunch. And, we've seen this a dozen times over with players like him, both in the Mavericks and with other teams. I think he's going to get his chances. I know the coaching staff likes him. They did not expect him to really factor into the rotation this season, but they really didn't expect him to, be this good once he went back to the G League. And so the fact that he's even getting called up, I think, is an indication that they are impressed with his development, and that I think at some point, especially when Spencer Dinwiddie or Luka Doncic will inevitably miss a couple games, just, because every player does, most every player does. I think he'll get us some chances. Christian Wood's a little bit more difficult, and I can get into that or not, but I guess the one thing I'd say is that if you think about him replacing, not the Jalen Brunson role, Brunson left, he came in, a lot of people kind of fixated on that. He replaced the Spencer Dinwiddie role. And how important was Spencer Dinwiddie last season? Very important, but was he the, 5th or 6th most important player to what made that team successful last season? Maybe 4th. But I think there's a case for 5th. And if you view him as kind of filling that role, I think it's more justified to say, all right, he's in the right role and everything makes sense around him. I know there's people who believe he's able to do more, but I don't know. I feel like we could talk in circles about this on and on and on again, and probably for 20 more minutes. And so I think that's probably the best way that I've come to kind of summarize his role in the team and his importance to the team and why there is some logic for him just playing the role that he has.
Speaking of players who have earned obviously more minutes on the floor, Josh Green has been a revelation for this team so far this season with his three-point shooting and some of the things that he has brought to this team. What have you made of his development and emergence as part of this rotation, now becoming a much more important part of this rotation for the Mavericks?
He's good, man. I didn't expect him to be this good this season. Like, the leaps that he's taken, he was growing into a better basketball player last season. But to go from this to one of the most important players on the team, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that, I didn't anticipate that at all. But, he provides things that, he provides defense in three-point shooting. And, we know that, when you have a player like Luka Doncic, and really if you have an NBA team in the modern era, you need 3-and-D players. But it's everything else he does outside of that, the fact that the Mavericks do run a little bit more when he's on the court, that they do get easy transition buckets, that, he's always moving. He's a slasher, he's a cutter, and Luka needs guys like that to, maximize what Luka, can do. If you want a Luka offense to, amplify Luka to the extent he's able, like, it all depends on the players you put around him. Like, if you give him a bunch of static 3-point shooters, then he's going to create a lot of threes. But if you give him someone who's going to cut to the lane in a creative way, he's going to make a, no look behind the defense, pass that looks like, it's coming from a mathematical angle that has never been discovered before. And so the fact that, just putting those people on the floor with him, I think is a really good thing. And it's why, I've been so impressed with this season thus far.
One more before we let you go, because I want to ask you about this when it comes to Kemba Walker and what we may see from him. What realistically should we expect from him at this point in his career and what the Mavericks are asking him to do?
Yeah, the Mavericks signed Facundo Campazzo to start the year, and then they waived him to sign Kemba Walker. I think my impression, my best understanding of this is he's just a version of Campazzo that they trust a little bit more, that they are willing to give bigger minutes to and feel like, if one of the primary shot creators and Dinwiddie and Doncic miss time, like that's a player that they have more faith in coming in and replicating their offense and, just being able to give them more. And so that said, Campazzo was, kind of an emergency third guard. And I don't think that Kemba Walker is going to push his way into the rotation, probably not at any consistent rate. There may be a stretch where he's playing 5-10 games in a row, but it's a limited role, and it's basically just replacing the guy they thought, they signed but didn't think they would really need, and then they got into the season and they're like, oh, we do actually, there's some games where, if we thought more of this player that we signed as an emergency, he would be getting minutes, but, they just didn't really feel like he could impact games. And I think they have a stronger release that Kemba Walker can. But as far as rotation goes, I don't anticipate that happening with him this season.
All right. Favorite sports cliche, and then let you go.
Oh, favorite sports cliche. There's so many.
Yeah.
And I hate them all.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's got to be one that you lean into a little bit, though.
Let's say, it's all the ones about the other team. Like the other team just executed better than us, or like our effort wasn't there. And these are all like kind of true things that usually just mean the other team was better than you, like has more talent and played with more talent. But I'll think of some more. I'll tweet them at you guys.
Okay.
Always. Good ones out there.
Appreciate that. You can find
and by good ones I mean bad.
Exactly. The opposite of what
I would want it no other way, Tim.
I know.
You can find him on Twitter at Tim_Cato, covering the Dallas Mavericks for The Athletic. He is the homie, Tim Cato. Tim, good to hear from you, my man.
Absolutely. Good to hear from y'all.